One of the ideas that President Trump has talked about recently is the possibility of removing the paying of taxes on Social Security benefits. But new research by the Penn Wharton Budget Model shows why the concept may have some issues. Pleasure to be joined here in studio by Ken Smetters, who's faculty director of the Penn Wharton Budget Model. Great to see you again.
Good to be here.
All right, so let's dig into the research and some of the concerns that may be out there from going down a path of removing taxes.
Right. I mean, it's certainly a popular idea whenever you tell people they can keep more of their money, but ultimately someone has to pay for it. And right now, the idea is not really funded anyway. There's no pay for it. So what we estimate is that it would basically reduce federal tax revenue by about $1.5 trillion over 10 years. And it would increase federal debt, therefore, quite a bit over 30 years by about 7%. And furthermore, that tax revenue actually gets deposited into the Social Security Trust Fund under current law. And so we estimate the trust fund currently is going to deplete in 2034, and that would get pushed up now to 2032.
Right. And I guess when you're talking about the removal of those taxes, the money that would be there, if you're looking at who gets Social Security benefits, the people who get more benefits to begin with would see a greater impact on their bottom line here.
That's right. And the way it works is kind of convoluted in that is not all benefits get taxed. It actually depends on how much benefits you get summed with your other non-Social Security income during retirement. And only if that total income goes above a certain threshold, does a fraction of your Social Security benefits get taxed. And so it is the case that those income tax brackets are still the same, the normal income tax brackets. Those get indexed for inflation over time. But the qualification of whether or not your benefits get taxed, they don't get indexed for inflation. That was part of the trickery behind all of this. But nonetheless, it raises tremendous amount of tax revenue. And so the real beneficiaries of this, given that lower and middle income class people are often not paying these taxes to begin with, the real beneficiaries tend to be higher income.
There are a lot of areas which I found interesting to kind of delve into. One of which that you bring up is the potential impact around the incentives to save and also to work as well.
Right. This is not just your normal debt where, yes, 1.5 trillion over 10 years at one time, that would be like a huge number now. People talk about 2, 3, 4 trillion dollars over 10 years. But it's this type of debt, and not only reduces capital formation, but there's kind of an additional effect, and that is if I know I'm going to get larger benefits in retirement, I don't have to save as much myself for retirement, and I also don't necessarily have to work as long and things like that. So there's macroeconomic effects that go beyond just the normal debt story.
You talk about a moment ago in kind of a 10-year window, but you also look at this from a 30-year perspective as well, and the impacts that would play out over that period also.
That's right. And so one of the problems with a lot of what we call budget scoring in Washington, D.C. is that it looks at the 10-year window, and there's all sorts of games that can be played with that. When we talk about entitlement programs, we usually want to look out further in time. But on top of that, all fiscal policy should be looking beyond 10 years. But especially in the case of Social Security, Medicare, and programs like that, we should be looking beyond. And what this will do is certainly produce more and more debt over time, decrease people's incentive to save and to work. And so we're estimating within 30 years, this provision alone will reduce the size of the economy by about 2%. That is, GDP will fall by about 2% relative to where otherwise would have been in 30 years. So as fiscal policies go, it's a pretty big loss.
Safe to say then, when you're looking at that 30-year window, that the impacts on people who may already be or close to being in that category of accepting Social Security benefits now would see a much different impact than somebody who would see those benefits, say, in 2054.
That's right. So when we think about who are kind of the winners today, there's definitely anybody who's close to retirement or within retirement, they're definitely going to be a winner here because they already saved their money. They did most of their labor supply. And all of a sudden, they just get this tax break.
Yeah.
And there's no real incentive effects for them in terms of working more, saving harder, or things like that. In fact, the incentives are, again, just slightly the opposite. But for the most part, not too much incentive effects for them. It's really the future generations. And so what we calculate, even though there's a lot of winners today, anybody who is young today, it doesn't matter if they're high income, medium income, or even low income. Low income households will even be worse off under this. And the reason why is that a lot of those low income households would not have paid Social Security benefit taxes to begin with because their income is going to be too low. But they're going to suffer from the macroeconomic consequences in terms of lower wages, simply because you're going to have less capital that's built up in the economy. Smaller economy and lower wages. And so it's that lower wage effect that's is really going to be dominating for them. So this is really kind of a trickle-down effect to the entire income distribution.
You also mentioned in the research that there would also be obviously a negative impact around GDP as well.
Yeah, so we estimate that GDP, the size of the economy, essentially will be about 2% lower than what it otherwise would have been in 30 years. Average wages will be about 1.8% lower. Capital accumulation over 4% lower. And so, yes, some of this is driven by the higher debt, but about 7% higher in 30 years. But a lot of this is not just the debt, but it's the fact that households now have less incentive to save for retirement and to work as long during their pre-retirement years.
And that would kind of lead to, I would think, kind of an uneven distribution of the benefits because of how much you're paying into it and how much people in the next 30 years would be paying into it as well.
That's right. So certainly for younger people today, it is true that let's think about a middle income class person who's just kind of entering the workforce today. We estimate that they're going to lose about $10,000 in terms of total kind of value over their lifetime. Someone who's born, 20 years from now, they're going to lose even more, around $22,000. That's kind of for a middle income class person. A lower income class person, or the lowest income class, they're still going to lose between $10,000 to $11,000 in the future. It is true, some higher income class people you think would benefit because they have lower benefit taxes, but they're going to lose potentially. Yes, they don't. They actually lose a little less than the middle income class because they benefit some from this tax reduction, but they also still get hurt overall if they're younger, just from the lower wages, and so we estimate they're going to lose about $15,000.
The importance of this also is partly because of the discussion we've been having in recent years about Social Security, about the trust fund, and trying to make sure that you have this as a component moving forward. Maybe this is part of the reason why the Trump administration is talking about this, but still it becomes an ever important conversation that we're going to continue to have in the years ahead.
Yeah, but the way the Trump administration is talking about this, if we're going to not tax Social Security benefits, is it's going in the opposite direction of trying to create solvency in Social Security. It's actually taking money away from the Social Security system. And so it's going to hasten the trust fund depletion date by about 2 years. So in 2032, we're only talking about 7-8 years from now. We were talking about the trust fund depletes. Now, at that point, it's not true that benefits just go to zero,
Right.
but benefits will drop by about a quarter. So you're going to get paid about 75 cents on the dollar that you were owed.
And the downstream impact then for retirees, they have to probably in many cases live much different lifestyles than maybe they thought they would have because of that cut.
That's right. And so it's not necessarily they can make up all that saving today, even, and maybe they can delay their retirement a little bit, but that's going to be another lifestyle change that they maybe were not expecting. And so they're going to have to definitely make some changes. Now, people say, well, Congress will figure this out. Well, we're already on this explosive debt path without this change. Congress hasn't figured that out. The White House hasn't figured that out. And so This just moves us even one more step in the opposite direction in terms of shoring up the nation's solvency.
Kent, great to see you again. Thanks very much.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Kent Smetters, who is Faculty Director of the Penn Wharton Budget Model.